Welcome to this edition of The Real Deal On and this continued series on reinvention. And the philosophy that we've been rolling on is that whether or not you're struggling with addiction or in recovery, if you're looking to take your life to the next level, you're going to have to reinvent certain parts of you. And on that journey, we oftentimes are blessed with meeting people on this path. And not so long ago, about a couple months, I was blessed to be introduced to this fine gentleman, and we're going to have a nice conversation about how this extraordinary man has reinvented his life. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Todd Alexander. Thank you so much for coming on in. And without kind of starting from when you were born, if you could share a little bit of your journey and what we connected on, because we do have things in common in the personal development world and how we've applied it to helping people transform areas of their life through recovery and beyond.
Absolutely. Well, first, let me say thank you. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. It really is. I obviously did struggle with addiction, and that is a big part of my journey. However, fortunately for me, it's been the majority of my life has been in recovery or in personal development, and that's a blessing for me.
How long have you been in recovery?
I'm working on 29 years right now.
Wow.
So it's been 28 plus years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. You know, and there have been many different milestones that I've experienced through that journey. You know, first year was amazing. You know, it was just so exciting to be able to be one of those people who, you know, could say, yes, I have a year, you know, of sobriety or clean time or, you know, personal development, you know, you know, then 5 years, you know, 5 years was a great milestone because every time I would be sitting in a meeting and seeing somebody share, you know, they had 5 years clean. That's what I want to be, that person. I want to be that person. And, you know, then I was. And, you know, then when I had 9 years, because 9 years was my using, I used for 9 years. And then, so when I had 9 years, you know, clean, it was another milestone. You know, I have as many years clean as I did using. Wow. You know, and the best part is I think that, you know, I finally started to grow up. You know, people ask
after 9 years.
Yeah, after 9 years, yeah. Absolutely. You know, people ask me where I grew up all the time, and I'm like, I'm not real sure. You know, I know that they're asking where I actually lived,
right,
but
course.
you know, where I grew up is a different answer.
Okay. So interesting how you are acknowledging at this point after 29 years that we laugh about that 9 years, and I'm sure you weren't thinking consciously at that time. After a year, like, oh, I'm not grown up yet, or after 5 years, because each of those milestones are extraordinary. While you were on that journey, what sort of trials and tribulations were you experiencing? Because sometimes people will say things like, oh, you know, once you're, you know, all you do is never pick up and your life is like miraculous, like everything's perfect and so forth. And I know that not to be the case with pretty much anybody. So what were some of the challenges that you faced? You don't have to get specific necessarily. However, you could share, or if you want to, that's fine, is how did you get through them? What were some of the strategies that you implemented to be sure that you didn't fall back to some old patterns?
One thing I hear often in recovery is, you know, people will say things like, I have, God willing, next week I'll have 90 days and my parents, you know, have left me with the home and the keys to the car and the boat. And I'm like, really? Because I had 6 years before my father would leave me in his house alone.
Wow.
You know, so some of us do a little more damage than others. But, you know, the vigilance, the constant vigilance of, you know, constantly reading and seeking ways to improve my thought processes, because I believe it all goes back to the way I think, you know, and overcoming all of my distorted thought processes, which I still realize that I still on occasion suffer from today.
Because you're human.
Absolutely. I guess that would be it.
That's not an addiction
No.
thing so much as a human thing, because we're always distorting things anyway.
Absolutely.
The distortion, what we've been learning, the personal development thing, is to train that distortion so that we can create a vision that may not quite have happened yet. Right. But be able to, if we're going to distort something to the positive that we can live into, as opposed to distorting the challenges into, the molehill into mountains.
Absolutely, for sure.
So do you still attend meetings? Is that part of your ritual?
I do, and I do it more to give back, for the contribution. Now, I think that I'm going there to give back, and then I hear something like, that's a good piece of information, put that in my file.
Absolutely.
All the time. And I recently have a friend who has been, my 28 years of recovery has been out there 28 years constantly steady killing himself. And but he recently decided to surrender, and it's a beautiful blessing. Because I came down here to Florida the last time when I saw you, and I went back to see him, and it was just so heartbreaking to see that nothing had changed.
Right.
Absolutely nothing. And I realized then that I probably shouldn't continue to go back, maybe a phone call, but to go there, it was really heart-wrenching.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, I said a prayer, hey, God, do what you can, and lo and behold, he did,
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And now how are you able to support him on his journey?
Oh, well, I get to be an influence in him, for him, a mentor. I get to take him to our world of Tony Robbins. He's going to go to an event with me in New York.
Oh, okay, great,
Yeah.
perfect.
And I get to, be a part of that journey for him too.
Okay. How powerful the Tony events and the whole personal development angle is what we've been bringing to the world of recovery. How have you found the best way to bring that to, because without casting aspersions, in many ways, some of the personal development philosophy flies right in the face of traditional meetings and that mindset. So how have you been straddling that? How do you get someone, have you gotten an old timer to kind of try the mindset of some of the personal development stuff that we've been exposed to?
I actually have, but it's only through my example, of living. I can say anything I want, but when I live it and I get the outcome from living it, it speaks for itself. One of the greatest tools that I recently came across, I think I might have shared it with you last time we were together, was, and I had been to probably 20 events before I actually heard it, was that our biggest driving need is for our behaviors to match our identity. Okay, and I've been sharing that ever since I realized it, because it's so powerful. Until we change who we believe we are, we can't change our behaviors on a lasting, basis.
Beautiful. So one of the things that we will ask this question, we'll say, what do addicts do? And what do addicts do?
They lie, cheat, con, steal, manipulate.
Is that what they do?
Use, yes.
Okay. So imagine that. Imagine, hi, I'm Doug. I lie, cheat, steal, manipulate, and use.
Right.
That is, if I'm saying that is my identity.
Without
so
question.
I'm going to be congruent. Even if I'm not lying, cheating, or stealing in that moment, now I feel incongruent.
Absolutely.
So then what will happen when I do the inevitable?
Absolutely.
I get to say, see,
right.
I'm an addict.
Right.
Interesting how over time, hopefully it seems like that's starting to shift, where people aren't necessarily just saying addict.
Absolutely.
It seems to be more accepted to say grateful recovering addict and things of that, presupposing gratitude and recovery.
No doubt. I've been introducing myself as a grateful recovering addict for 10, 12 years of my journey, and when I realized that, I'm like,
Look.
Somehow it shifted automatically. I think God did for me what I couldn't do for myself, and He said to introduce myself. And some people frown upon that, but I don't really care. You know, I really don't.
should you?
Right, exactly, because this is my identity, right? And you're so right about it elicits that you're grateful and you're recovering. You know, so that's a great identity to live up to.
Right. You just so happen to suffer the malady of addiction.
Absolutely.
It's not. You wouldn't walk around going, "Hi, cancer. Nice to meet you." Like it just doesn't do that. And by the way, I know that this may irritate some people, but the disease of addiction is the only one that you're in control of it's returning or not. Cancer, you could do everything. Leukemia, any of those, you could do everything right and it could still come back. But with addiction, if you work your program, if you do all the things that are in your program consistently, it doesn't just come back. It doesn't return like cancer might or some other disease. And I know that might irritate people on one level, but I think that plays into the real addiction is being addicted to being the victim.
Absolutely. That's a good point. I don't know when that shift came, but it's a great freedom to not be the victim anymore and to be the victor. You know, but one day I woke up and I heard myself talking and I'm like, wow, you're not a victim anymore. And it was so enlightening. An aha moment.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right about the what did you say? How did you say it?
I forget.
Maybe you could repeat it. No.
Yeah.
What did you say? I don't know.
About the returning, about being in control.
Oh yes, about being in control and returning to the addiction. The people who thoroughly follow our path. Okay? People who thoroughly follow the path of recovery, okay, don't ever have to return to using. You know, relapse does not have to be a part of their story. You know,
No.
I mean, it's a part of mine, but
Well, and here's why again it goes back to being human. This isn't about being the disease of substance addiction. Okay. If you were on a diet, and let's say you said, you know what, I'm not going to have, I'm going to change my diet, no more McDonald's, or no more carbs. Oh, by the way, you know what the 3 worst addictions are for entrepreneurs?
What?
Carbohydrates, heroin, and a salary. So, but like, let's say you said, that's it, you know, no more McDonald's. You're going to drive by McDonald's and they're going to be pumping that scent out there. Are you going to crave?
Yes.
That's normal. So
Absolutely.
Craving is part of being human. So that's going to happen. What does the person who's committed to their lifestyle shift? They go, okay, thank you, stomach or nose, for sharing, and I'm going to choose a healthier option.
Right.
Is it possible that that person may break down and have a Big Mac?
Absolutely.
And then the difference is that they just don't die.
Right.
But someone could die from going, I used to eat Big Macs. That was this size of or amount of whatever my drug of choice was. But it's about being human. And the addiction part in us is really like, dare I say, do you ever think people are lazy?
Often.
Often. What if they weren't lazy? They were just extraordinarily motivated to do as little as possible to experience a desired result. So drugs and alcohol is lazy state management strategy because it's easy, it's simple, it's quick, and it's what some people get used to. Or is it a very efficient way to get a desired result instead of doing the work? Doing you've built businesses, yeah?
Yes.
Did you win lottery?
No.
Oh, so it required some effort.
Effort, absolute effort.
And discipline and consistency. What's the percentage of people who start a business and within a year still have that business and it's profitable?
Very, very small. Extremely small.
Less than 10%.
Less than 10% for sure.
What are the odds of the stats on someone who takes the weight off and keeps it off?
Same, yeah. Less than 10% for sure.
What are the odds of people successful in their recovery?
It's challenging for sure.
But it's the same thing. It's the same philosophy, right? So you do the work to build your business, discipline, you get up every day, you work your business plan.
Absolutely.
For your recovery, you work your
recovery plan.
Sure.
Sure.
For your health, you work your lifestyle plan, your health plan. And I'm not minimizing, of course, anything. I'm just listening to you going, this is the same thing as like all the other stuff. You've built a business the same way you built your regeneration, your reinvention is took you 9 years. For you now, you look back and it goes after 9 years of discipline that you go, oh, I was starting to grow up.
Right.
What a gift.
Absolutely.
Because, I mean, from my perspective, I'm thinking, wow, that's hope for anybody. If they're not feeling it right now, if they're not feeling like they won lottery, because that's what happens, I would imagine. Did you feel like you won the emotional lottery after treatment?
Oh, absolutely. You know, every time I would leave treatment, I'm like, and I say every time because I had to continue to repeat that process. I was a little stubborn.
What a chronic relapse?
Chronic relapse. Right?
How long were your times in treatment, then time before relapsing and going back? What was the kind of time frame you would do?
You know, it varied.
Okay.
There was one time I thought that I was checking myself out of treatment to go to my mother's wedding, and it had little or nothing to do with going to my mother's wedding. I checked myself out, left treatment, was scared to death, called back to get back in, and they said, sorry, can't do that. And so, because I had already gone through the detox and they didn't know if I had used, and they would have had to do a whole intake.
Right.
But anyway, hours later I was using and went to my mother's wedding with a black eye that I got from downtown West Palm Beach.
Wow.
Yeah. It wasn't a good experience, to say the least.
So, interestingly, when you shared, like, you know, what we said what addicts do and so forth, did your work in whatever your recovery plan was and the discipline you did that, were you able to, or would you say that's partly responsible, what you learned in the program to be successful in your businesses?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The discipline of doing something daily, you know, and, you know, putting one foot in front of the other, and, you know, knowing that the only person I can really count on to get it done is myself, you know, and absolutely, for sure.
Have you found that some of the people that you've met in the business world, where you've done business with and you've been, you know, very successful and forged great relationships, to find out later into the relationship that person was in recovery as well?
Yes, I have. It's a very interesting experience, for sure.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. I have a few friends as well who are very successful and just hang out, do their thing, and then just turns out it's like a matter of factly.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, I've been sober for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, 5 years, whatever, and they don't lead with that.
No,
where it's part of who they are.
Part of who they are, right.
It just is,
right.
But they don't, and that's where the victim mentality, I think, might also play into. It's almost like when someone leads with it, I wonder if there's an element of them kind of looking for some rationale, like, well, I overcame all these obstacles, like it becomes a thing. Whereas in the right context, like we're sharing here, there's a purpose behind it, but I pretty much almost guarantee that you don't meet people and, you know, within the first 5 minutes you're telling them about your war stories and, you know, how you struggle with addiction or struggled with addiction and now struggle with life or whatever, you know, like it's an interesting thing, that victimhood that we can tend to fall in.
Absolutely, and it's so prevalent in today's world, you know, and my friend who's newly in recovery, you know, he has friends that he's associating with, and just me being in that environment and just listening to the stories, and then I will chuckle, or I'll, you know, just get a look on my face, and he'll be like, "What?" And I'll be like, "Nothing." You know, but to hear the stories, because as we know, you know, our story is what, you know, we live.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the stories that people have that keep them stuck. You know.
Yeah, it's a shame, because the problem that we all face is we get something out of it.
Absolutely.
We it's like this woundology. It's like, rather, because it's difficult. When you and I met, I mean, we were basically celebrating our successes and, you know, just like sharing like cool stuff, and that's all great. But oftentimes people, you know, instead of going, oh, Robert Graham, who'd you steal from? You know, what business do you have that like rips people off? Like it's almost like we minimize. We don't want to celebrate success and we're afraid it's going to make someone feel bad, instead of going, look, if I can do it, so can you.
Absolutely.
Let's do it together. Let's figure out a way to do it. And then what do you hear when someone says, like, I love sometimes there's some people and it's a great reminder. Well, I'll say, wouldn't it be nice to do X? And like, okay, let's do it. And they're like, we're already planning. Like, whoa, hold on. Okay, I guess, okay, we're doing it. Like sometimes we even have these ideas, and then there are other people who are actually already, once they have the idea, they're doing it.
Right, they're already living it.
Right.
Absolutely.
And by conditioning ourselves to the success, and I think that's such the huge value add that this conversation, what you bring to recovery, is that philosophy, that mindset, not the victimhood, but the warriorhood, the tribe of warriors and champions who are willing to not make that be their story, just an element of it.
Absolutely, and it's a little disheartening to go into meetings because there's so much of that, life is horrible, life is a drag, my parents hate me, my boss wants me gone, and it's
you're like, I want you gone too. You shut up. You're so depressing. Like,
but I always share a positive, upbeat, inspiring, motivational, encouraging message.
And how does that get received when you do that?
I used to think that, and it gets received by some people great. Okay,
Right.
Many people come up, great message, thank you for sharing, you inspired me. And when in early recovery, it was really important for me to sound good.
Yeah,
Okay, and
We're always worried about how we look, how we sound.
absolutely. But one of my friends, he called me out on it. And he said, Todd, he says, do you want people to come up and say, man, he sounded really good, or do you want people to say, man, he really touched me? And I said, both. But now today, really, I much prefer to touch somebody,
Of course,
and inspire them and motivate them and encourage them. But you said, how is it received? And by some, I thought it was received by all. Great, However, there are people that will judge, and not believe, what's coming out of my mouth because they don't see how I live.
Yeah, well, obviously they can't see that whole thing, and also that would, from the way I would also perceive it when I'm speaking, and I notice that it's the state they're in.
Right. Absolutely.
When they're there, right? And
No
that's
question.
that's one of the things we always tell people, like, go to a meeting, and if you're not jiving with the meeting, find another group. Don't say meetings are not for you.
Right.
That meeting
Absolutely.
may not be for you, because there's going to be people like you at meetings where you go, I'm going to go where Todd goes, I'm going to go because it's uplifting, it's motivational, it's inspiring, he touches me. We're not sharing war stories, we're actually sharing hope, real hope and possibility.
Right.
Now, of course, we understand why people share some of the things, why they feel so bad, because sometimes they're thinking that if I keep reminding myself on how horrible things were, I'll never do it again.
Right.
But all that does is put you in the very state that you wanted to avoid in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's funny because I recently, when I was down here last time, I attended an event, and the girl that was teaching it was called. Doesn't matter what it was called. It was a really cool event. But she taught me that sometimes if I only share the outcome, and I only share the outcome, and I only share the outcome, that people don't really care about my outcome. I care,
Right.
but many people don't care about how great and awesome my life is. They want to hear, how I struggled,
Right.
how I overcame it, and then how I got to this outcome.
Right. Well, it's
which
got to
is-
be the contrast.
Absolutely. Without the contrast, there is no, I want that too, because he didn't suffer what I suffered. He didn't experience any of the things that I experienced. So, he's just living on a pink cloud, they call
Right.
it. But I guess I've been on a pink cloud for like 28 years. Not to say that I haven't struggled and haven't had hard times. I
Right.
have. And I've had many things to overcome.
When you're in that openness and that state of gratitude, you can then overcome those challenges with grace and elegance, because you're like, hey, this is just part of life.
Absolutely.
To expect, I'll often ask when I'm in a group or a presentation, I'll say, who wishes they didn't have problems? a bunch of people raise their hands. We're like, oh, that would be great, no problems. I'm like, well, hold on, let's think about this. People without problems are dead in cemeteries. What you want are higher quality problems.
Absolutely.
Which is a better problem to have? What white tablecloth dining you're going to be doing, or which dumpster you're going to dive into.
Right. Absolutely.
They're both problems. People who dive into dumpsters don't like hearing about someone going, "What do I do, Morton's or Ruth Chris tonight?" Like they don't want to have that, sort of in their face. But the reason why it gets so frustrating is we know as we're eating at Morton's, the only reason why you're stuck in the dumpster is because that's what you're complaining and focusing on.
Absolutely.
You're not absorbing the opportunity to go, well, if I do the things and I start building other problems and I'm grateful for them. I mean, it's just that emotional and spiritual muscle, right? To build your businesses, did you have to overcome some challenges?
Yes, many.
Did you know going into it that you would? You didn't know what challenges, but you knew you'd have some.
Some, sure. Absolutely.
Were they bigger than what you thought they were going to be?
In many cases, they were, for sure.
And what did you learn along the way, and what did you go in to them knowing that what you could
Overcome,
figure it out, and not know how, but just to be in that. And that's the balance. That's the balance of storytelling. I mean, is how do you share your story where you're not playing the victim, you're playing the victor, but still sharing the adversities and the challenges in a way that people can appreciate, not like in the woundology. Because what happens most times, someone goes, "Oh man, this was so effed up," and then someone goes, "You think that's bad?"
Right.
Man, I had like 10 times worse, and like we get into a competition on whose life got worse.
Sure.
And if we can flip that, and that's what you've done, is by leading by example, you can share the warrior's journey, show where you made those decisions. Like, what do you do when you do experience some pushback from life?
I pick different scenarios that, as opposed to this or that, or black or white, or good or bad, or and I learned this through my experience in the personal development world, is that, giving myself other options, more choices,
Right.
will allow me to find a solution quicker.
And how appropriate. If drugs and alcohol are not the problem, they've just been the solution or a strategy. The more strategies you have available, the more flexible you'll be in your approach to getting to your desired outcome, which is ultimately to be happy, fulfilled, peaceful, loving, all of those things. And there's so many other ways to do it besides just drugs and alcohol.
That's a good point. Absolutely.
And that's how I'm really just getting that from what you've just shared is that you have been more flexible.
Absolutely.
And that in order to do that, that's how you build your businesses. That's how you build your relationships. I mean, heck, look how flexible you are. You came here. We met that one day. We both were very flexible. We spent a bunch of time together. And then you came in the next day. You came in and spoke, all because your goal is to have an impact, to make a difference in people's lives. And then by proxy, we benefit.
Absolutely.
And it's not because we're expecting it. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It just show up and
it happened by osmosis.
Right. And then same thing, Jonathan will have on in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I can't
Same
wait.
thing. We spent a bunch of time. We spent like 40 minutes on the phone today just kind of learning about each other. And that's the gift of being open and serving. Like I look at us as servant leaders.
Absolutely.
Like that's just, we're here to serve, but leading by example. Not that we're going to sacrifice ourselves for someone else to the degree that we'd be drowning as well.
Right.
Like the example, which is if someone's drowning and you're in a boat and you're nice and dry and you're just doing great and they're drowning, which is a more successful strategy, to jump in, get underneath them and try and push them onto the boat, or to stay grounded on the boat and pull them to safety?
Pull them to safety, obviously, yeah.
Yeah, so like your leadership is that wonderful exemplar of possibility and how to transmute it from possibility to probability.
Sure. It's funny, I said absolutely, okay, but it's only absolutely, obviously, to someone that sees it as being obvious, to pull them into the boat as opposed to jump in and push them up.
Right, and we don't do that consciously.
No.
It's some sort of those habits, and I think that oftentimes we do that energetically because we don't want someone to feel bad. Like we're because we're doing well at something. Like I'm sure when you were new in recovery, you saw people, and still do, but maybe you were more aware of when there were people who had more time, who were more successful, there was a bit of, you know, envy or jealousy or thinking, you know, telling a story why it's easier for them and not for somebody else.
Absolutely. I certainly have suffered from envy and jealousy, and fortunately, those aren't character assets today.
And you've changed it by just doing the work.
Absolutely. You know, by constantly putting one foot in front of the other and just, you know, being vigilant, you know, to what I want, you know, what the outcome I want.
Right.
You know, so that I know what path I have to take to get there. You know, it's quite evident that, you know, lying, cheating, conning, manipulating, you know, is not going to get me to the outcome that I want.
It's not sustainable.
Ever.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely not sustainable.
So what advice would you have for someone, because now you have a friend newly in recovery and so forth, what advice would you have for someone who maybe has been a chronic relapser, who has kind of struggled, been to treatment a few times, and they're like a combination lock trying to get that right sort of thing? I mean, was there a turning point for you that you said that was it that you could share, or just from your observations, seeing what you know now and what you've been observing with others, is there some nuggets or bits of advice you could give for someone who's maybe been there?
Absolutely.
Or is there?
I think that gratitude, you know, our friend Tony says that you can't be grateful and fearful at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I've never known anybody to be grateful and use, you know. So gratitude is a key that can take you places that you never thought you could go. And I believe that no matter what, it doesn't matter what happens, never give up, never throw in the towel. You know, doesn't matter what happens. You know, really, there's no reason to ever give up. You know, right. on a better quality of life. You know, now I did have a lunch meeting with a friend yesterday, and I said to her, I said, you know, how only 5% or less of people actually, you know, take anything from a personal development event and apply it in their lives and improve the quality of their lives. And she says, really? She said,
it's that high?
She said, how can you say that? And I'm like, well, you know, I mean, to live an outstanding life is what I was really talking about. Right, you know, life at a peak level. You know, because she said that, you know, she had an interesting point of view. She said, well, so somebody takes a piece of information, they apply it to their relationship with their children, and it improves the quality of their lives with their child. That's all they wanted. They got benefit out of it. You know, it improved the quality of their life. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's...
Well, that's where we all run that challenge, where we all need to be a little careful that we don't put what we think is happiness on someone else.
Absolutely.
Now, we can tell by someone looking at them like, well, yeah, that doesn't look happy. Like you're not smiling, right. You're unhealthy, you can't walk up a flight of stairs, you got no money. You say you're happy, and maybe that's true, and then we're the kind of people we are, personal development people who get fully immersed, like, and you could be just a little bit happier in these other areas, and then what would happen? Like, we're always trying to add value in all of our interactions and so forth. And with recovery, it's the same thing, where people, it's that balance, right? Because people are up and down, right? Because sometimes people used because they were maybe awkward, right. And that was their strategy to loosen up a little bit.
Sure.
Then when they get sober, they're awkward. And then at first you might be like, well, I don't know, you're kind of more fun when you were using. Like, I don't get it. But then you got to go, wait a minute. What if this person is okay with just being awkward? Right. That's just, you know, like, I'm awkward, I know it, but I'm okay with it. So then I'm like, okay, well, then either you'll get it or you won't, but I'm not going to be worried about it. I'm just quirky. So, like, if we can find ways to allow our freak flags to fly and celebrate all those things, because the truth is, my experience anyway, I could be wrong, is that almost everybody feels out of place anyway, in some context.
It's probably true. That's absolutely an accurate assessment, I would assume.
Right, and ultimately what it is why the program is wonderful, and others, that once you're okay with that, you can then open yourself up to really, because again, not to get too esoteric, oftentimes for me, I feel like it's not feeling connected to God, that awkwardness. That's when I'm feeling that weird, that lack of congruence that we talked about earlier about the identity. Like,
Right.
you know, is that, man, no, that's why I'm feeling weird. But when I'm just present and okay with being weird and awkward and go, man, God is everything, so is all of that, then all of that other talk goes away, and I'm just okay with however I am and not judging it as awkward or otherwise. So it's been correct me if I'm wrong, maybe for you, but for me, you know, back in the day when I was, you know, very active in bad things, it was a spiritual experience for me. It was just a kind of an illusion of spiritual experience, just to shut down the chatter and the self-talk and the not feeling, you know, good, or I mean good enough, you know, like, and my experience with Tony, the very first time I did a UPW, that was my breakthrough, was a spiritual awakening of, oh my gosh, if I am in God's image, and that's true, and I'm playing small, I'm dishonoring God. I'm not being the best I could be, and what a slap in the face to my Creator. The gifts the universe, God, whatever language you want to use, has provided me, and not just me, everybody. So what I gather from, again, why we connected so well is you and I believe similarly, to let everyone shine and to access the best version of them, and drugs and alcohol just get in the way.
Absolutely.
It's the illusion of thinking you've got that, but really it's an emotional and spiritual credit card that you got to pay back.
Absolutely.
With interest.
That's a good point about the playing small and not, you know, giving God the glory. You know, it's because I find myself at times recently realizing my worth, you know, realizing my value, and then at other times, because I'm human, forgetting that.
Stupid human.
Damn. You know, but and I find myself certainly not wanting to play small, you know, because of the journey that I've been on, you know, and it's certainly it's not a good choice, you know, because if I have all these things on the buffet and playing small, you know, why would I even want that on the buffet, you know,
and that's all relative too. Someone small could be someone else's huge, and someone's huge could be someone else's small, and it's all relative. Like, to be like a parent, like one of the biggest gifts, you know, you and I both share is being parents.
Absolutely.
That's a big deal. Like, some people look at that as, it's just, you know, like I have to change the world. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm present with my wife and my daughter, and I did change the world.
Right,
I just changed my world, her world, their world, and had a spiritual experience. And it's that comparison thing where we're making these versions of what playing big or small is. And what I found, again, just for me, is to, like, what did Helen Keller say about doing the little things as if they're the big things? It's in those little moments of presence that we do change the world, just the ripple effects, by being so present, being so spiritual in that moment, by not having all that other stuff, that then gives us the muscle and the momentum, and then the magic happens on a bigger level that helps even more people and so forth.
You're really good at this.
Well, no, I'm just just kind of reflecting back what you're sharing in a way that, like, I can, because you're coaching me right now when we have this conversation. The biggest gift I get is communicating with other people, because, you know, maybe I'm not all there. I sometimes have to kind of put it back together in my head so I could go, oh, that's awesome. like I'm going to do what you're doing so that I could get those results. I just have to be able to paint it in a color in my handwriting so that I can
right. So
read it.
Read it.
So what are some things that you're excited about right now as we're moving forward, and things that, if we've got some people watch this stuff and listen to this.
Right.
I'd love to get, for them to know you and to again, meet all of us and create a movement, and that we could be exemplars for people. What are some things you're excited about that maybe people could go, hey, what's Todd up to?
Okay. Well, I don't know if you remember the gift that I brought for Heidi when I was here last time.
Yes, absolutely.
That's my daughter's company, and it's it's a play on words sort of, but it's believe there is love in the world. Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and then be the love.
Yep.
Okay, and if I can keep that at the forefront of my mind, in every interaction that I have, life seems to go a lot easier.
Doesn't it?
Because I believe that love is God and God is love. And so if I can be the love and be God, in kind of like what would God do, in this situation.
Remember David and Goliath?
Yes.
What would Jesus do, baby? We're dating ourselves, so anyone who's 20 or 30 and younger, I think, might go, but look up Davy and Goliath, old school claymation.
It's funny you say that. I went to an event out in L.A. back in February, I guess it was, and I called my daughter, who's now 13, and I said, honey, Daddy's going to meet John Travolta and Halle Berry and Drew Barrymore. And the phone went dead silent.
And
I'm like, what's the matter, baby? She's like, I don't know who any of those people are, Daddy. I'm like, sure you do. And I had to remind her of who they were. She did because she's seen them in movies, but no recollection, no comprehension of who they were off the top of her head.
And when you threw out up your nose with a rubber hose, that didn't.
No, it didn't help at all.
Yeah, no,
not at all. And it's funny you say.
Welcome back, Cotter.
Right.
1977.
It's funny you say that because I'm at trade shows and I'm talking to youth and I'm like, Vinnie Barbarino, and they're like, they're looking at me like I have 6 heads. I'm like, gosh, you guys, man, I'm so old.
Well, we can sort of end on this and it might extrapolate into something else, but last night, Heidi and I walk into the kitchen and came home, and I hear different strokes it takes, different strokes. It was on Showtime, and they're playing the old Different Strokes episodes, and we actually have bought like DVD sets. We bought. We found at like a thrift store. What was the one with at the same time? With the girls and Natalie and Tootie and Blair. What show is that? Facts of Life. Yes, thank you. So like all those, but all of those shows back then, they were like parables.
Absolutely.
They had messages. Like everything had like at the end, you were like, oh, there was a lesson in that, and we learned something. And maybe that's part of what the inspiration behind this show is. This conversation. I mean, this show, like everyone's got a TV show now, the internet. But the idea that if we're going to be investing our time, like let's invest it in like something that's going to help us become more, not just like emotional and spiritual candy, like not just something that when we're done, the only reason why we feel better is because our life is not as effed up as the person we just watched, whatever show that was, like comparatively, but that there's a lesson here that you're sharing today, that you're coming here and just being present and honest, someone is going to hear, and that's going to change the world because they're going to go, oh my gosh, there is hope, there is possibility. All I need to do is a few little things, and then I'll start to be even more grateful.
Absolutely.
Because that is it. I mean, gratitude. That is love.
That it is, absolutely, without question. It's a grateful heart just can't put poison in their body.
No, right? I would say that to people starting like, man, if you were doing the most loving, if you asked this question before consuming any drugs or alcohol or anything, what's the most loving thing I could do right now? Would that be one of the top choices? And you're like, no, Not even
not
there.
at all. Not even on the list. Yeah.
So when we are being the love, so your message is amazing. So we'll be sure. Is that site up and everything? Is there a place to get it?
It's not, but it
There
will
will
be.
be.
But it will be.
So by the time this airs, once it's up, we'll make sure that there's a way for people to get access to that stuff, because ultimately, if that's the message everyone gets, is just be the love.
Right. It is. You know, if they can just apply that in their lives, you know, life will improve dramatically.
Because isn't that what we want anyway?
Yeah.
It's just to be loved.
Absolutely.
And the last thing is, my experience has been, just for me, that I've spent a journey the first 40 some odd years of my life trying to know myself. And the last 20 or so, I've allowed myself, given myself permission to be myself. And then ultimately, the goal is, if I'm going to be able to love you, to love my wife, to love anybody, first person I've got to love is myself.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't really matter what order you do that in, though. Because if you loved yourself, well, in order to love yourself, you'd be giving yourself permission to be thyself.
Right.
And then you'd have access how to get to know yourself, even more
right.
anyway. Or if you gave yourself permission to be thyself, let your freak flag fly, be whatever, you know, just be present, well then you give yourself permission to love yourself or get to know yourself either way, and then they would all come
Kind
full
of cyclical,
circle.
yeah.
So it's true, all roads do lead to home. Or not, I'm just spitballing here now, I'm just having fun with you. Is there any last words you'd like to share? Do we feel complete?
I think we did a pretty good job.
You did awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't care what they say about you. So Todd, thank you so much. God bless you. And if there's anything that we can do to support your journey, and for those of you here, always please feel free to come join us again. Please like, share, spread the word. Our goal is to add as much value as humanly possible to you and your loved ones. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send them in to us. We're here to serve and support. We love you for who you are and who you aren't. God bless.